right, match 3. We are on the draw. Uh, we have all of our colors, but this hand's a little slow. We do have Hazoret though. So if this were, I mean, we kind of have to keep anyway. I mean, we can cycle cast out if we need to, if we feel like we're not against a creature deck. But yeah, this is the type of hand where you can't really mulligan, and it's just kind of the price you pay for playing so many removal spells is that sometimes you just draw lands and removal spells, and your hand doesn't really do anything proactive, but that's okay. We'll draw into some creatures, it's fine. Or just more removal spells, which is also fine if we're playing against Sultai. We're playing against Temur, so a little slow to develop, but we can basically deal with anything they do. We're going to use our worst removal spell against them, and hey, look at that, Tocatli. That's a good spell to draw, good creature. And we just cycle our cast out because we're a little removal flooded. We drew another Tocatli. All right, and now it is time for Hazoret. The reason we played Hazoret there, we could have played Campbell. I think that would have been fine, but I wanted to just jam Hazoret for mana efficiency's sake. Felt like if we draw a land on our next turn, we can play uh, the Lightning Strike and then either one of our other two spells. And if we play the land, let's say we draw another tap land or something, we could just play it and play two spells and attack with Hazoret. Whereas if we played Campbell this turn and we draw like a tapped land, we can't play Hazoret and Lightning Strike. So we would not be able to attack with Hazoret next turn. So we'd have to play Hazoret this turn in order to be able to attack with it next turn. So that's why we did that. We're basically anticipating to draw a tapped land. So as it turns out, we don't draw a land, so we can't attack with Hazoret. But we did draw another Tocatli, which is pretty good here, because now they can't just draw a removal spell. So the reason that we just went ahead and played the second one is because it just has such a strong effect on the cards in their deck, especially when they're low on energy as they are. And by stopping that, by basically taking away a removal spell, whether it's an Abrade or a Lightning Strike, or even a Dragon, to deal with our Tocatli, to turn on all their other creatures, well, I just want to jam the second Tocatli, you know? Like, I'm not worried about your Whirler Virtuoso when you have 5 energy, you know? Like, I want to prevent you from getting any useful like energy and stuff out of the cards in your hand. So I'm imagining my opponent and their 4 cards in hand. Like if they're all lands, whatever, we're going to beat them no matter what our line is. So we have to assume that they're cards like Rogue Refiner, where they're just like waiting and they don't want to just not get any value. So they're trying to draw a removal spell to deal with its Tocatli so they can play their cards. Well, in that case, we'd rather play another Tocatli, you know, so that even if they draw that removal spell, they're still kind of, out of luck with their creatures. So we draw Captain Lannery Storm. Great. All right, I'll play that. And then I will Lightning Strike your blocker. And then I'll just attack you with a million creatures. And opponent's just like, all right, throw in the towel. I've had enough. So this is this is like the Thalia kind of thing where you play the card and you're like, well, I don't know, like how good was it? Did it do basically nothing? Or did it completely dominate the opponent's plan? And it's like, well, I don't know what's in your hand. If it's 4 lands, it didn't do anything. If it was like Rogue Refiner, Whirler Virtuoso, it did a ton. So it's hard to tell like how good Tocatli was this game. But we ran the opponent over pretty handily. All right, game 2. So the way we want to sideboard with Temur, against Temur, is, and I wrote about this in the written portion, so consult that for exact notes. But you basically want to take out Spray and Campbell, and you want to bring in the Ixalan's Bindings and the Chandra's Defeat, and then the 4th copy of Harsh Mentor and the 4th copy of Tocatli. I think Campbell is just, they play a lot of creatures and not a ton of spells, so it's kind of not super effective. We'd rather have another Harsh Mentor and another Tocatli. And then for Magma Spray, it doesn't kill a lot. On the draw, it has some utility because you can kill their second turn Servant, or if they don't have a first turn attune, you can kill their turn 2 cub, and you can kill the rogue refiners, but killing a rogue refiner, that's not even really what we want to do. So yeah, we'd rather bring in cards like Ixalan's Binding, which can prevent them from casting further copies of the card, and Chandra's Defeat, which is a very efficient way of dealing with Glorybringer. So we'd rather replace them with those more effective, more potent removal spells. So game 2, we're on the draw. And this hand looks okay. Because we can play first turn Dragon Skull Summit, and then we can start casting our creatures. We get to play Mimic, Mimic, Harsh Mentor no matter what. And that's a pretty reasonable start. If we draw some lands, great, we can start playing the Crop Mate. If they can kill our Mimic, then we can use Crop Mate to get it back. And then eventually we'll be on the Hazoret plan, so this hand is fine. And they do have the turn 2 Cub, and we don't really have a removal spell for it right away, but eventually we have the Binding. So they are on the Cub plan, and now here we just wanted to jam Tocatli. So the reason that we played Tocatli first instead of the Mimic is because, well, we're on the draw. If we play the Mimic and then they play, say, a Rogue Refiner or a Virtuoso or something on their next turn, well, we're kind of in a rough spot. You know, like, what did the Mimic really do to us? Okay, great. You know, it means when I play the Tocatli the next turn, it's a 2/4. Like, cool. But really at this point, it's kind of like, all right, the second Mimic, we just didn't really have time to deploy it, early. So we're just going to have to, it's just going to be one of the weaker cards in our hand at this point. I felt like Tocatli, especially when the opponent misses a land drop. They missed their third land drop, which means they're probably holding like Virtuoso, Rogue Refiner in hand. So it's probably waiting to come down. And if they draw that, we want to basically take that off of them, because whenever we draw our a fourth land, we're probably going to want to use that to bind the Cub, because they're on the Cub plan and they're starting to get out of control. We're getting a little low on life. So that's why I played Tocatli on that turn. And they did draw a third land, and they did have the Virtuoso. So playing the Tocatli there did actually stop them quite a bit. And we don't draw a land. And I figured I'd rather just play the Crop Mate, because my thinking is, okay, if I don't draw a land next turn, well, I'm probably going to want to do, I'm going to have to deal with a Cub one way or another next turn, because it's just getting too big and my life total is getting too low. So if I play out a 3/2 creature this turn, if I draw a land, I can play Binding on the Cub, and then I can attack with the Crop Mate and get the Mimic back. Or if I draw a land, I could also just play the Mimic from my hand and then play attack with the Crop Mate, get the Mimic back. So I have a 3/2 Mimic, a 2/1 Mimic, then I play the Mentor as a 4/4. So that's another line I could take. So I'm just kind of thinking I'm not going to block this turn with the Crop Mate, because I don't have any good blocks with, I could trade it for the Virtuoso, but I can't kill the Cub, so I can just pump, make it a 5/5, so even a double block doesn't kill it. But I'm at 14, so I can afford to take one more hit and then try to set up for next turn. So I'm basically thinking, what's the thing that makes my following turn optimizing the next turn? So that's basically why I made the play that I did. So I just block and those two bounce, and I take the Cub, and I did draw the land, and I play the Binding on the smaller one because I want to get the attack in. So the only difference, since they didn't use their energy, if they went all in on their energy with the Cub and made this a 5/5 and they only had 2 energy, I would have targeted the 5/5. But they weren't doing that. Instead, they just were keeping it as a 3/3, just stockpiling energy. So the untapped one was threatening to be a 5/5. So basically, it's only 1 power and toughness smaller, and I figure it's worth it to get the attack in with the Crop Mate here. We're basically putting a +1/+1 counter on their Cub and getting a Mimic back into play. And I think that's a trade that favors us. That's basically why we targeted that one. So they make a 1/1. They get in an attack. We don't take it, or we don't block. We take it. They play another Virtuoso, which again is kind of bricked by the Tocatli. Now we do our thing that we're talking about, where it's like Mimic and Harsh Mentor. So we have a 3/2 and a 4/4. They have enough mana, enough energy to make another Thopter. But if they do that, then their cub can no longer attack effectively, because they just have a 4/4, and we have a Harsh Mentor as a 4/4. So they have to make this decision now, so that they don't take the damage from the Mentor. They decide to go with the Thopter. We play the Mentor. Sweet. Now this is a big turn. What happens? Oh, Chandra. Okay, so they Chandra, kill our 4/4 Harsh Mentor. Now they're in a position where they could make an attack, but they had to use an energy because they didn't have the double red without using the Ether Hub. So that kind of hurt them. Now, instead of having 2 energy, being able to make the Cub a 4/4, the Cub's now a 3/3. So now our Metallic Mimic could trade with the Cub if they so choose. So they think about making an attack, and they do. So they go for it with everyone. This kind of puts us in a spot where we definitely have to make some blocks. I think that it's a pretty clear Tocatli on the Virtuoso, because those can bounce. I don't want to lose my Tocatli if I can avoid it. I want to get rid of this Cub, because if they can produce more energy, that's the creature that's the biggest threat right now. So I'm going to have to make that trade at some point anyway. Like, I have to block it this turn. I can't just take 3 more damage. So that's pretty obvious blocking the 3/2 there. So now it's the question of what do I do with these? So I could put the Mimic in front of the Virtuoso just so I only go to 5, but that's chump blocking to save 2 damage. Not really what I want to do. The other question is I could put the Mimic in front of this Virtuoso. So I'm still taking 4, but I'm basically trading Virtuoso for Mimic. So the question is, do I want to just trade Mimic for Virtuoso here? Because next turn, I'm not really going to have that option. I went with no, because here if I go to 3, which is what's going to happen no matter what, then I want to be able to attack Chandra for 1, and I want to be able to basically hold off all their attackers. I want to Lightning Strike the Thopter if I can. Because like that's eventually gonna like buy me a couple extra turns, and a couple extra turns with a Hazoret in play is really good. I did the math, and we couldn't quite kill the opponent. So on our next turn, we have 3 from Mimic, 2 from this Mimic, that's 5, plus this guy on taps, that's 8, plus Tocatli is 9, plus 5 from Hazoret is 14, plus Lightning Strike is 17. So if we draw an untapped land, we could kill them, except we can't take all the damage. We would die. So like, there's no way for us to take the Cub. We could chump block Cub with Tocatli and take 6 and go to 1, but then we're 1 short. We can only deal 16 on the swing back. So like, if we had another land in hand or something, like an untapped land, I would have just made that play if they were at like 16. But I couldn't afford to make that play since we'd be 1 short, but it was a thing to consider. And when you're in these kind of spots, you should consider those things, because sometimes that is your best route to victory. But as it stands, we just made this play, go to 3. So that was a pretty reasonable draw step, actually. By drawing Campbell here, it means that if they use a spell, like a removal spell to deal us damage, well, we gain life from the Campbell. So the Campbell is actually going to put us in a good spot. So we want to Lightning Strike their creature and play Campbell. So Hazoret can't attack anyway, because there's no way to cast 2 spells, like Hazoret and one of our other spells this turn. And next turn, no matter what we draw, we can get in there with Hazoret. So I think that the play here is pretty clearly Campbell and Lightning Strike. So it's the question of what other combination makes that our best line. And I definitely want to kill Chandra because we're at 3, and it's on 1 counter, and it's naked right now, completely vulnerable. So Tocatli pings in there for 1, and Devoted Cropmate attacks the opponent down to 12 and gets our Metallic Mimic back. because if we're casting Campbell, we'd want Campbell to be a 3/4. So now in this spot, I could have just attacked Chandra with the Crop Mate, which is what I was thinking about doing, and just leave this Cotley back as another blocker for the Virtuoso. But since we drew Campbell, the thing that I want to do here is I basically want to kind of bait the opponent into going for it if they have a way to go for it. There's no way for us to beat Dragon. Like, we can't beat a Glorybringer. So if they draw an untapped land and cast Glorybringer, well, we're just dead no matter what. So we have to assume they don't have Glorybringer. And if they don't have Glorybringer or the land to cast it, then I think this puts us in a really good spot. Because if they have a removal spell, well, it doesn't actually kill us now because of Campbell. Because we have 2 blockers anyway. So we're actually in pretty reasonable shape at this point. We could afford to exert our creature and get the Mimic back. They cast Attune, which is good for us, because we get to drain them for 2. Then they cast Hydra, which doesn't get them any energy when it enters the battlefield because of Tecatli. So they got the 2 energy off of the Attune, so they're up to 3. So they can make a Thopter or activate Hydra once. They attack for 2. Now here, it's kind of an interesting decision. Well, do we cast Lightning Strike? And if we do, on who do we cast it? So we could Lightning Strike the opponent down to 7. We could Lightning Strike a Virtuoso, or we could Lightning Strike a Thopter. So here's the math that we should be doing. Lightning Strike a Virtuoso, do we have lethal? Well, we cast Hazoret and attack with everyone. They block Hazoret, well, this guy's exerted, so they block Hazoret and they block Campbell. So they take 3 from Mimic, 2 from Mimic, that's 5, 1 from Tecatli, that's 6. Well, they're at 10. So we don't have lethal on our turn if we cast the Lightning Strike on the Virtuoso. So then the question is, well, do we want to use it on a Thopter? And I think the answer is yes, because if we take it and go to 3, they can make another Thopter on their turn, and then that's 3 Thopters threatening lethal the following turn. So I'd rather just Lightning Strike now, take 1, go to 4. The most they could do is make another Thopter to threaten a 2-power flying attack next turn, which puts us to 2, and we have yet another turn to try to lethal them. And if we're casting Hazoret to get in the damage, well, they're going to have to start making some blocks and losing some creatures, or they're going to have to start casting some spells, which Campbell drains for 2, which puts them even closer to lethal and gives us another turn of hits we can take from the 2 remaining Thopters. So that was my reasoning for killing the Thopter with Lightning Strike. So it just buys us some time. We drew another Lightning Strike, and now at this point, we can afford to just play the Hazoret and make an attack. We could just Lightning Strike their Thopter, but at this point I'm thinking, okay, well, you attuned for a land, so you could theoretically just Dragon us if you have it, but now you have the mana, so if you just have Dragon in your hand, we're dead no matter what. But if you don't have Dragon in your hand, if Dragon is the top card of your deck, we're dead. If it's the card beneath the top card of your deck, well, I want to kill you on the next turn so that you don't top deck that, have that one last turn to top deck that Dragon and draw it and kill us. So that's basically, we're trying to minimize the number of draw steps they have to draw that Dragon, because that's basically the way that we're going to lose this game if we lose. That's my thinking. So we play the Hazoret, just attack with Hazoret, so we have a good attack next turn. We go to 2, we have the Lightning Strike, so it's not lethal next turn. They play a Virtuoso, it doesn't do anything because they don't get energy, it's just a chump blocker. We discard our land to deal them 2 damage because we don't need another land. We can still cast the Lightning Strike. We don't cast Lightning Strike on any of their creatures because I want to see what's going on. I want to get the damage in. And I'll explain it to you after combat here. All right, so basically, we attack with everyone, and I did the math, and I was like, well, okay, this is basically what has to happen. They have no energy, so they can't get red off of Ether Hub. There's basically no spell they can have to help them out, I guess. Or if they have, I don't know, some Maverick Unsummon or whatever, we need Campbell to get the damage in. And if they have a counter spell, So they block here, they block here, and they block here. So they blocked our 3 biggest creatures, and they took 3, 4, 5, 6. They're at 8, so they go to 2. So if we cast Lightning Strike and they have a counter for it, all right, well, they die to the Campbell trigger. And so basically they have no way to beat a Lightning Strike in this spot. But if we Lightning Strike, say they're Virtuoso pre-combat, and then they go, okay, I'll cast my Blossoming Defense. Well, Blossoming Defense, I guess Blossoming Defense, they would take 2 and go to 6, but then their creature would still be alive, and all right, they would still die, I guess. All right, so it didn't matter what we did that turn; they're just dead. But basically, yeah, by drawing the Lightning Strike, just pitch the land and strike them, and they're dead. But yeah, the Campbell did a little bit of work. I said to board out the Campbell, which I believe I did. Yeah, so I think it's okay to leave in 1 or 2 copies of Campbell in this matchup because it does do some work. Like there's just the power and toughness on it is pretty good. And as you can see, like in this spot, like just being able to drain for 2 off of the Attune is pretty good. And if they played like a Chandra here instead of being lethal, we'd stay alive and harness lightning, things like that. So I don't mind playing Campbell, but the fact that it's legendary means just it is the type of creature that can be somewhat ignored by them because it's not super effective. It's not like a control deck where it's like, oh god, I'm getting drained for 4 every turn. I have to deal with that right away. Here it's like, okay, great, like maybe I'll get drained for 2 one more time this game. So I really don't want more than 1 copy of Campbell. So if you want, you can leave in 1 copy, but I could also see cutting all of them post board. So yeah, Temur Energy. Tocatli did some work. Harsh Mentor did some work. Hazoret did some work. And that is Temur Energy.